I'm gonna make this American flag print today, and I'm gonna show you every step along the process from putting the metal on to building the frames and everything in between. It's a pretty simple process. There's not a whole lot to it, but I'm gonna take you through the entire thing. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just grab an X-Acto knife like this, and I'm gonna cut off the excess paper all the way around. Just gets it out of the way. You don't really need to do this, but it always helps. And we're gonna slide this out of the way for now. We're gonna grab a piece of aluminum. For this size, I'm doing a 20 by 30 inch print. A lot of you guys may be doing something smaller like a 12 by 18 or a 12 by 8, but we're gonna do something big for this because I'm gonna hang it on my wall in the office. So the first thing I do with this is just pull off the clear tape. Make sure not to get any of your fingers on the print when you're doing this, so you don't want to pull it off and touch the print. That's why I keep my hand back here on the plastic at all times. And what I like to do is just check it and make sure there's no dust particles on it. If there is, you can just blow them off. A lot of guys use air compressors, but you don't need one. I've never used one. They do help though. And you're gonna take your print, make sure nothing is on it, no dust or anything. You wanna make sure it's perfectly clean. Again, this is when it's best to have an air compressor just so you can clean off the paper or the panel. I do have one coming. I need one very soon because it'd be helpful. But I'm gonna take this panel and just set it right over the paper. Now what I do with this paper is I've printed a 0.3 inch bleed edge all the way around because apparently the aluminum expands in the heat press. And if you have the bleed edge too close to the aluminum, the aluminum will expand over it and you'll have a white border all the way around it when it's finished, and you don't want that. So always print a little bit extra all the way around, and this also allows you to line up the panel perfectly on it because you can see if the border is even all the way around. So I just check it a couple of times to make sure everything is perfect. Once you lay it on, you can kind of just slide it around a little bit. And if that looks good the way I think it does, I take this heat tape and I put 8 pieces all the way around on this one. You can do 4 on smaller prints or as many as you'd like. I just like to do 8 to keep all the edges nice and tightened down. Works well. So I do the corners and the sides. And this just keeps anything from getting inside under the paper before it goes in the press. And also, it allows the paper to sit really tight to it when you put it in the press, and there's no chance of getting some folding or anything because paper likes to bend when you put it out. It doesn't lay perfectly flat. Two and 3. So that step is done. That whole process of putting the aluminum on the paper is finished. It's very easy. And then I'm just going to take it and I flip it over because this paper faces up inside the heat press. Now for a lot of you, if you're just getting started making metal prints, you're probably going to be using something smaller like this. This is a Vevor 16 inch by 20 inch heat press. And for everything that goes in here, I go for 400 degrees at 2 minutes. This allows it to give it I get the perfect finish when I do it for this. But I'm not going to be using this heat press because I have a bigger print that needs to go in this bigger press, so let's show you that. For this press, this is a 32 inch by 24 inch kilo heat press, and for all these big prints, for whatever reason, I can't do 2 minutes at 400 degrees. So what I did instead was I turned the temperature down to 350 degrees and I go for 5+ minutes. I also turn the pressure up quite a bit so that it sits really tight in here for 5 minutes and I get the perfect prints. I don't get any banding or miscoloring or anything. The big problem I had was with the higher temp and the lower time was the ink wasn't getting enough time and opportunity to transfer into the metal. And so I was getting bad prints. That was the solution I found to fix it. Once the heat press is warmed up, I'm gonna put this panel right in here, 30-inch panel and a 32-inch heat press, so there's not a whole lot of room to mess up here. You have to make sure it's centered almost perfectly. And once it's good, I'm gonna take this paper, I already put one on the bottom, and one is gonna go right here on the top, Covers the whole thing. I like this brown paper because it's 24 inches, so it covers this perfectly. For the smaller one, I buy a 20-inch roll. It's white. It's the exact same stuff. Put this in, and then I'm just going to take handle here and lock it down for 5 minutes. All right, now that this is finished, we're going to open it up here, take this paper out, just throw it on the ground. And I'm going to take my heat gloves because it's 350 degrees. You have to grab this. What I like to do is just take the bottom paper and pull it out, grab it from the bottom, and I just have these cooling racks here that I set everything on. They usually cool down in about 2 minutes. If you leave it inside the heat press to cool down, it'll probably take 30 minutes. While that cools down, I'm now going to build the shadow frame that goes on the back side of this. I have 4 pieces here. This is 24 inches long by 14 inches wide, and I'm going to put all 4 corners pretty close together, and then I'm going to take these corner brackets and I'm going to put little screws into this each piece. There's going to be 2 screws in each one. You can see this is what it looks like, and then I just take my screw and I twist it in and I set it in there just a little bit. And so after I've put the screws into this corner bracket, I have another piece that goes with it. Place them both into the corners here, and what happens is the screws push down against that second piece and they expand and they tighten in the corner, and that's what allows the frames to hold together. So I'm just going to take all 4 pieces and just slide them together. What I like to do is this bottom piece, I put the 2 in before I slide them up. This just makes it a little bit easier, kind of a trick to get this frame to go together nicely. Then I'm going to take a small screwdriver and I'm going to make sure that these corners are very tight together, as tight as possible, nice and smooth. And I'm not going to tighten this down too much. I just kind of snug everything down. Snug this last one down here. And then for this last one, I actually tighten it all the way, as tight as I possibly can. And then I go all the way around and make sure everything's good. And that's when I tighten it all down nice and tight. This just allows this frame to tighten up a little bit more level. Now, it's not always going to be perfect all the way around. There may be slight gaps in each corner. These frames are not always cut perfect. One thing I also like to do is I flip it over just to make sure that it's level. And when I set it down, my mat's not always level either. I can test and see whether it's good or not. As long as it sits flat, it's good. If it has any wobble to it, just bend the corners a tiny bit and you can get it to sit level. Now what we're going to do is the frame's done. I'm going to flip it over and keep this flat side up. This is the side that is going to attach to the aluminum. I'm going to take my tape here. This is foam tape. I'm going to put 4 pieces all the way around. So I just measure it out like that and I cut it. Done. Measure it out. Cut it. Doesn't have to be perfect, just enough to cover most of the area. Good. And then I just go all the way around and I flip the tape over and make sure that it's as centered as it can be. Run my thumb down it a couple of times and just make sure that everything is pushed down nice and tight. We're getting pretty close to finished here. This print is done and cooled off. I'm going to take off this paper. And I'm just going to pull off each piece of tape. It's kind of hard to grab at them with these big prints. I don't want to touch this print at all, so just make sure to hold it from the bottom. And then I'm going to take my paper here. This is just a protective paper I put over it. I'm going to roll it out. I'm going to take my panel. I'm just going to set it face down on it. And I'm just going to cut about 1 inch all the way around. This is just rough. Doesn't have to be perfect. And leaving a little excess around the edge allows me to fold it and tape it when I'm done, and that'll be used for shipping. Lastly, what I'm going to do is take these 2 jig pieces that I had made and set them in both corners so that the frame can line up perfectly here. And I'm just going to take this tape, and what I do is I pull the tabs off the sides of them slightly. It can be a little tricky, but I just fold them down a little bit, and I just all the way around. Then I take my frame, and I can just line it up right into the corner here, making sure it's all tight. This isn't the easiest thing to do, but you kind of get used to it and you get better at it over time. I'm just going to push one of these corners down and hold it tight. And then I can pull this and make sure that it is all perfectly even in there. You just have to make sure that these these jigs are pressed tight in each corner. And if that looks good, then I just press it down all the way, make sure one side is locked in tight so that it can't move, and then you're good to go to start peeling off all these tabs. And that's the why I fold them out, so that you can grab them once the frame is on. And I just push it down. I spend a lot of time pushing it down. I want to make sure it's secured really tight. And if there's any concern about whether or not it's level, you can just check it with a ruler. And that looks perfect. And here we have a super nice finished custom metal print American flag. If this was going to a customer, I think they would love it, but it's not. Instead, I'm going to hang it right on my wall. Set it up. And I think that looks pretty good.